The air was sharp that night, the kind of cold that slips through layers and settles in your bones. Andre had felt it before this kind of cold, but tonight, it pressed differently. He zipped his coat higher and kept walking, one hand stuffed deep in his pocket, the other carrying a reusable shopping bag full of coats he planned to donate at the church near the Ninth District. He didn't expect anything to come out of it. He never did. For Andre, the yearly coat drive was more of a ritual than a cause. Something about offering warmth to others made the winter feel less silent, less cruel. Maybe, in some quiet way, he believed that if he kept giving warmth, some might find its way back to him. He walked past shuttered cafes and flickering holiday lights. The streets had emptied. Families were inside. Lights glowing in windows. Laughter was faint behind thick walls. Andre's world, by contrast, had gone still. It always did this time of year. He reached the church steps and left a few coats in the collection bin. Just as he was about to leave, a small figure caught his eye, curled up under the archway, between the side columns. It was a boy, not yet 10, shivering in a hoodie too thin for this weather. Andre paused. Something pulled at him, not pity, not guilt, something else. Recognition, maybe, or the unbearable stillness in the boy's eyes. He reached into the bag, pulled out the warmest coat he had left, a thick, heather gray wool one. The moment he stepped closer, the boy flinched, like a stray unsure of kindness. Andre crouched down, holding out the coat without speaking. The boy didn't say thank you, didn't move right away. He just looked up at Andre with eyes that were too old for his face. Then, slowly, he reached forward, took the coat, and whispered something nearly swallowed by the wind. "My dad used to wear this kind of coat." Andre froze, not because of the words, but because of the voice, the tone. Something cracked in his chest like old ice giving way under pressure. "What's your name?" he asked softly, not expecting an answer. The boy hesitated, then said, "Leo." "And your dad?" The boy looked away. "Julianne," he replied. And in that moment, the world narrowed. Andre's throat went dry. The name hung there, heavy and familiar like a ghost that had finally stepped back into the room. Julianne, the name he hadn't spoken aloud in 7 years. The name he used to say into someone's neck in the dark, before shame and family and fear pulled them apart. He didn't ask anything else, didn't press. He stood there, watching Leo pull the coat around himself, and knew something impossible had just been set in motion. Andre walked away, not because he wanted to, but because he didn't trust himself to stay. That night, he didn't sleep, not just because of the boy, but because of the silence that followed the name, because of the cold that had nothing to do with the weather, because somewhere in this city, a boy named Leo wearing his old lover's eyes had just reminded Andre that even after all these years, there were still pieces of Julianne in the world. And maybe, just maybe, they were meant to find their way back. If this story moved you even just a little, you're not alone. This is Heart Stories, where stories of quiet courage, lost love, and second chances find a home. Subscribe to our channel and let these voices keep speaking to you. Andre had kept a box in the back of his closet for years. It was small, taped shut, and rarely touched. Inside were memories he had no use for: old photos, train tickets, letters in handwriting he once knew by heart. He had meant to throw them away a dozen times, but every time his fingers brushed against the cardboard edge, something made him stop. That morning, after hours of lying awake, Andre stood in front of the closet like a man staring at a locked door he no longer had the key for. Except he did. He always had. He just didn't want to turn it. Until now, he brought the box to the table, peeled away the tape, opened the lid. The scent of aged paper filled the air, soft and dusty like a memory unfolding itself. At the top, a faded photo of Julianne smiling, sleeves rolled, sunlight in his curls. A time before everything turned quiet between them. And then, near the bottom, a small envelope, still sealed. His name written on the front, Andre. No date, no return address. He hesitated, Years of silence had hardened around him like armor, but Leo's voice, Julian's voice, had cracked it just enough. He opened the letter. Julian's handwriting hadn't changed. "If you are reading this," it began, "then something has already happened. I don't know if you still think of me. I don't know if you hate me. But I need you to know this. I have a son. His name is Leo." The words didn't register all at once. "He wasn't planned, but he is the most honest part of me that's ever existed." Andre swallowed hard. "I'm raising him alone, not because I wanted it that way, but because I was too afraid to live fully, too afraid to keep you and be his father. And in doing that, I lost both. If one day Leo ends up in a world without me, I don't want him to feel abandoned. I want him to meet the one person who once showed me what love without fear looked like. I want him to meet you." Andre folded the letter slowly, like he was afraid of breaking it. He sat there, still for a long time. The hum of the fridge, the ticking of the wall clock. Julian had died with that letter unwritten on Andre's heart. And Leo had no idea what his father had carried in silence. Andre suddenly remembered the look in Leo's eyes, the wariness, the weight, the way he touched the coat like it had come from another life. He needed to see him again, not for closure, for something else, for Julian, for the boy, maybe even for himself. He called the shelter listed on the church's flyer. No record of Leo, no recent admissions. He called the local outreach center. Nothing. Andre's voice cracked slightly as he asked again, "You're sure there wasn't a boy?" Leo, about 9, curly hair, brown eyes, alone. They apologized. He hung up, heart tight in his chest. It was like trying to chase a shadow, like Julian had returned through a crack in time only to vanish again. Leaving behind a thread Andre wasn't sure how to follow. He put the letter in his coat pocket, then walked out the door, back into the cold, back to the streets, back to where it began. He didn't have a plan. He just knew one thing. Julian had asked for something in that letter, something no one else could give. And Andre had never stopped loving Julian enough to say yes. The city had a way of swallowing people whole, especially the ones too small to be noticed, too quiet to be heard. Andre searched every place he could think of. The parks, the soup kitchens, the frozen benches and alleyways where people passed and forgot. Each evening he returned to the church, and each time, the bench beneath the archway remained empty. Days blurred together. He carried Julian's letter in his pocket like a compass, though it gave no direction. He wasn't sure if he was chasing a ghost or a promise, but he knew he couldn't stop. It was a Tuesday evening when he found him. The wind was bitter again, tugging at scarves and hats and faces turned down to the ground. Andre had nearly given up for the night when he passed the edge of a small public park tucked behind an old music school. There, under a tree stripped bare by winter, was a boy, Leo. He was sitting cross-legged on the frozen earth, his back to the wind, the gray coat pulled tightly around him. His head rested on a backpack, eyes half closed as if he'd learned to sleep in pieces. Andre didn't call out. He approached slowly, his own footsteps muffled by the frost. Leo looked up just as he reached him. There was no fear in his eyes this time, only the wary calm of someone used to being approached, then left alone. Andre knelt down in front of him. "Are you okay?" Leo shrugged, voice flat. "It's not that cold tonight." Andre glanced at the reddened skin around his knuckles. That was a lie, but it was the kind boys like him learned to tell early. He didn't press. Instead, he sat down on the grass beside him. Silence stretched between them. Then Leo said something so soft, it nearly drifted away in the wind. "You left last time." Andre's throat tightened. "I didn't mean to," he replied. "I just didn't know what to do." Leo reached inside his coat and pulled out something small, an old photograph, crumpled at the edges. He held it out. In the picture, a younger Julian smiled at the camera, one arm draped over a faceless figure cropped out. Is that your dad? Leo nodded. He said he had someone once, someone who made him brave, but then he got scared and left. Said it ruined everything? Andre stared at the photo. He didn't need to see the other half of the image to remember the day it was taken. He was the part cut out. Leo tucked the picture back into his coat. He never told me your name, he added. But I think it might have been you. Andre didn't answer. Instead, he reached slowly into his own pocket, unfolded the letter, and handed it to Leo. The boy read silently, his lips pressed together tightly near the end. He wrote this, yes. Leo didn't cry, didn't move, but the way he held the paper gently, as if it might dissolve, said enough. Andre looked at him carefully. Do you have anywhere to go? Leo shook his head. They said they'd find me a place. But I don't want to go to strangers. You wouldn't have to, Andre said. Not if you came with me. Leo hesitated. Then, with a small motion, he reached out and touched the lapel of Andre's coat. There, pinned just above the pocket, was a tiny rainbow flag. My dad had one of these, he whispered. Andre's voice trembled when he replied, He got it from me. And in that moment, something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. Two people, once held together by a man no longer there, were now beginning to build something of their own. Not out of obligation, out of choice, out of what was left behind. Andre never imagined he would walk through Julianne's past again. But days after taking Leo in, he stood outside the same courthouse where, years ago, Julianne's parents had fought to keep their family name untouched by scandal. They hadn't succeeded in silencing Julian's truth, but they had succeeded in cutting him off. Now they wanted what he had left behind. The morning had started with a knock at Andre's door. A woman in a camel-colored coat, clutching a manila envelope and wearing a polished kind of sadness that looked too practiced. She introduced herself with a last name Andre had long erased from his life. Julian's sister. She didn't ask how Leo was, didn't thank him for taking the boy in. Instead, she handed over a formal notice the family was filing for custody. We believe it's in the child's best interest, she said. He needs stability, blood. Andre said nothing. He didn't raise his voice, didn't argue. He closed the door quietly. But inside, something surged. Not anger, not fear, resolve. He hadn't asked to become Leo's guardian, but Julian had asked, in that letter, in his absence. And now Leo had asked in his own quiet way, too. The hearing was scheduled swiftly. Andre barely had time to gather documents, let alone prepare for the weight of what would be said. He stood in the courtroom wearing his spouse jacket, the one he used to wear to donor galas back when he still thought making a difference required champagne and strategy. Now his hands were steady, not from confidence, but from clarity. Across from him sat Julianne's parents, both rigid, expressionless, his sister next to them, nodding occasionally as the attorney spoke on their behalf. Their argument was familiar. Leo needed family, a name, a future built on structure and tradition. And Andre, he was not legally married to Julian, not a blood relative, not someone, in their words, with legitimate claim. When it was his turn to speak, Andre didn't look at the judge. He looked at Leo. The boy sat in a chair just behind him, legs dangling, gripping the same letter he had read again and again at night. Andre drew a breath, then began, I don't have a birth certificate to prove I belong to this boy. I don't have a marriage license to prove I belong to his father. What I have is a letter written by a man who knew his time was running out and chose to trust me with what mattered most to him. He paused. I knew Julianne when he was brave, before shame taught him to speak softer, to stand smaller. I knew him when he was proud, and I watched that pride get chipped away by people who couldn't accept the truth of who he loved. He turned toward the judge. I'm not asking to erase anyone's name. I'm not here to rewrite the past. I'm here because Julian asked me to carry something forward. Because Leo deserves someone who doesn't just show up in court, but shows up every morning when the nightmares don't stop? Who makes tea with honey the way Julian used to? Who tells him that the man he came from was not weak, but wounded, and still tried to love through the cracks? The courtroom was silent. The judge didn't answer right away, but Leo did. He stood up, walked to Andre, slipped his hand into his, then looked straight at the judge and said, "He's my family." No one said anything else after that, and in that silence, everything changed. The judge's ruling didn't come with celebration. There was no applause, no tears in public, only a firm voice, a final statement, and the sound of a gavel hitting the bench like the closing of a door. Andre was granted full guardianship of Leo. He signed the documents with steady hands, though his heart felt anything but. Across the room, Julien's parents stood up and left without looking back. They hadn't said a word to Leo. Not then, not after. Andre didn't expect them to. Some people walk away when they lose control of a narrative. Others stay and learn to write a new one. Andre chose the second. That evening, they went home together. Leo carried the letter like it was still breathing. Andre cooked the pasta, burned the garlic, and forgot to turn off the oven. Leo laughed for the first time in weeks. The apartment didn't feel like a home yet, but it didn't feel empty anymore. Winter began to lift. Leo started school again. His drawings changed from stick figures with missing faces to small families standing beneath trees, always with two figures holding hands. Andre started keeping tea in the cupboard, just the way Julian liked it. Lemon ginger with honey. They created rituals, small ones, Sunday grocery lists, Wednesday walks, the promise of pancakes on mornings when the world felt heavy. One afternoon, Leo came into the room holding a framed photo Andre had left leaning against the wall. It was the only one they had of Julian smiling with both of them, and one taken long before Leo was born, digitally stitched from two moments never meant to meet. Leo stared at it for a long time, then looked up and asked, "Can we put it up?" Andre nodded. They chose a spot above the bookshelf, where the light hit in the late afternoon. Later that night, Leo came to Andre's door, not frightened, not unsure, just quiet. He said one sentence, simple and soft. "Is it okay if I call you Dad now?" Andre didn't answer right away. He just opened his arms, and Leo stepped into them. Sometimes, family doesn't arrive in delivery rooms. It arrives through absence, through letters unopened, through choices made in silence, and followed with everything left in a person's heart. Andre never got to tell Julian goodbye, but every time Leo ran through the house, every time he asked for help with homework or sang off key in the shower, or waited for Andre at the gate after school, it felt like Julian had said goodbye in the only way he could, by sending back a part of himself that Andre would never lose again. And maybe now is the moment we ask each other, do you believe that family is something you choose or something you become? Let us know in the comments, because your story, just like Andre's, is part of something larger. If this series found a place in your heart, join us at Heart Stories. Subscribe for more stories where healing begins, not in perfect families, but in the ones built from love, loss, and the courage to try again. You've stayed with us through the final page, but there's always another story waiting to be told. We'll see you there.